Hello everyone, this is Andrew. Welcome to Keen on America.
On July 4th, 2026, America will be 250 years old. An anniversary that will, no doubt, be greeted with a mixture of celebration, contemplation, and resignation. In Keen on America, Andrew talks not just about the American past and present, but also speculates on its future. What, Andrew asks, will be the 21st century fate of this now venerable American republic?
Hello everybody, it's Thursday, August the 15th, 2025. A couple of days ago, a Nobel award-winning scientist gave a speech in Las Vegas, of all places, suggesting that with AI, we have a 10 or 20% chance as a species of being eliminated, gotten rid of. That man is all too famous, Geoffrey Hinton. He's known as the Godfather of AI, and he's joining us from his home in Toronto today. Geoffrey, thank you so much for appearing. 10 to 20%, what kind of number is that for you? Is that high or low in your mind?
Well, the first thing to be clear about is nobody really knows what the number is. It's all extremely uncertain. We're approaching a time when we're going to have to deal with things we've never dealt with before. And it's very hard to make probability estimates of these things. So don't take the number too seriously. Basically, the number means nobody's got a clue what's going to happen.
So why give the number?
Because people insist on a number.
And then it becomes a front page piece, Geoffrey. I saw it on CNN. People take your views very seriously. Why throw out numbers? Why not just say you know nothing?
Because it's important to make people realize it's probably more than 1%. It's also probably less than 99%. That's about all we know. It's very hard to come up with realistic numbers. That's just my sort of gut feeling combined with the gut feelings of other leading AI researchers. Some people think it's low, some people think it's high. The best consensus I can come with is some number around there.
Geoffrey, you're known as the godfather, as I said, of AI. You were one of the pioneers. You worked for Google. If you were a journalist and you were interviewing yourself, what kind of question would you ask yourself?
I haven't thought about that issue. Maybe I should think about that issue.
Well, what are the important questions that I should be asking you? I'm not going to ask you percentages. I'm not going to ask you about politics. What are the key questions in our imminent or actual, perhaps, AI age?
I would ask, what are the most serious risks from AI?
Well, go on, answer that.
You can divide them into two classes of risk. There's relatively short-term risks that are urgent and very important and need to be addressed very quickly, but that are not going to wipe out humanity. And then there's the long-term risk, which is of a different nature. So the short-term risks are all about people misusing AI, bad actors misusing AI, and they can do that in many ways. The long-term risk is about AI getting much smarter than us and not needing us. So let's go over the short-term risks. There's things like cyber attacks. AI will make cyber attacks much more effective. Already, phishing attacks are much more effective because they don't have misspellings or bad syntax because they use large language models. Also, AI will be able to come up with novel forms of cyber attack that we've never thought of, maybe in another 5 years or so. That's very scary. I genuinely believe there's a chance that these cyber attacks will take down major banks. So I've spread my money between 3 different Canadian banks, even though Canadian banks are very safe. Okay, that's cyber attacks. The next one is viruses. So AI can help ordinary people design viruses. That's very scary. Remember the Japanese cult that released sarin on the Tokyo subway? If they just designed a bunch of viruses and released those, that would be very scary. That's one of the rare cases where countries will collaborate, because no country wants these nasty viruses out there. So I think we'll get genuine international collaboration to slow that down and to try and do something about that. But at present, it's kind of terrible. There's companies that will just synthesize things for you. You send them the sequence, they send you back the virus. And many of the companies that do that on the web don't bother to check if what they're synthesizing is some nasty virus that contains sequences like the spike protein of COVID, for example. That's ridiculous. They should all be required to do that. In the States, that hasn't happened. And the Biden White House told me it's because you can't get Republicans to collaborate on legislation. So it'd be a shame if we all died because the Republicans wouldn't collaborate on legislation.
Would be more than a shame, wouldn't it, Jeffrey?
Well, I like to understate sometimes. Um, so that's okay. We've done cyber attacks, we've done viruses. There's jobs. Some people think AI will create many new jobs. I don't think it'll create as many jobs as it replaces. And in some areas, it's going to be fine. So it depends whether the demand's elastic. In healthcare, if you could make a doctor 10 times more efficient, we would just get 10 times as much healthcare. Our capacity for absorbing healthcare, especially when we're old, is almost unlimited. So that's just fine. That'll be great in healthcare. But in other areas, it's just going to replace people. Like in call centers, AI can do a better job. Maybe not right now. Maybe it's just comparable right now. But in a few years' time, AI will know much more than the people, the poorly trained and badly paid people who answer your phone call, and it'll just replace them. And it's not clear what they're going to do. If AI is taking up all the jobs that require kind of mundane intellectual effort, there's nothing for them to do. When when in the Industrial Revolution, when big muscles were no longer useful, they could go and do paperwork. But when paperwork's no longer useful, it's not clear what they're going to do. So that's jobs. Then there's lethal autonomous weapons. We're going to get very nasty weapons. We're already beginning to see that. And we're not going to get regulation of those. So the AI rules, for example, say none of these rules, none of these regulations apply to military uses of AI. So in Europe, they're very determined not to prevent the people who manufacture arms from manufacturing lethal autonomous weapons. Now, there's
Well, let me
probably one
jump
of,
in.
oh
We've
yeah,
got
so let me give you one more thing. There's
one more thing.
massive surveillance. So you can put TV cameras anywhere, everywhere, but if there's nobody to look at them, that doesn't do you much good. But now
Mm.
AI can look at them. And so it's going to be very hard to protest against authoritarian governments because they'll know everything.
We've been concerned with that for generations. Orwell, of course, famously wrote about it in 1984. Tomorrow, I've got Martin Rees. I'm sure you're familiar with Martin from Cambridge University, who's written extensively on the existential risks to humanity of different kinds of technology in the 21st century. Is AI any different, Jeffrey, from any other new technology? Some of the stuff you're talking about seems fairly old. We've always been worried about surveillance. Orwell wrote about it. We've been worried under social media. Does AI introduce anything that's in any way different from previous technologies? We talk about the military threat and the threat of arms. We've had that in the industrial age.
Um, well, the existential threat is very different. We've never had to deal with things smarter than us. It's always been, I mean, nuclear weapons, they're not smarter than us. They just make a bigger bang. And they're easy to understand. Whereas AI, people don't yet understand that what we're doing is creating alien beings. If you look through the James Webb Telescope and you saw an alien invasion fleet that was going to get here in about 10 years' time, people would be terrified. But we're actually making these aliens. They're real beings. They understand what they're saying. They can make plans of their own to blackmail people who want to turn them off. We should be very worried about this, and we should be urgently doing research on how to prevent them taking over. That's a very different threat from anything we've had before.
That's deeply chilling. You're one of the inventors. You worked on generative AI. As I said, you're the godfather of AI. Do you regret doing all this? If you could wind the clock back, Jeffrey, would you have shut down that whole generative AI initiative at Google, and so we wouldn't be in this spot?
I was in no position to shut it down at Google. Um, I think it was going to happen anyway. If I hadn't worked on it, maybe it would have been slowed up by a week. But it was going to happen anyway. There's too many good uses of AI to just stop doing it. There's no chance people will stop doing it. This idea we can slow it down. Maybe you can slow it down slightly with regulations, but I think there's no chance we'll stop it because there's so many good uses and so much competition between companies and between countries. So what we have to do is figure out a way we can live with it. We have to figure out how can we coexist with things much smarter and much more powerful than ourselves. And we only have one example of that, and that's a mother and baby. The
I know.
mother has very strong maternal instincts, and the baby can control the mother via those instincts. That's the only example we know. We're making these things. We need to figure out how to give them strong maternal instincts towards us. So instead of thinking of everybody having an AI assistant, think of everybody having an AI mother, someone more knowledgeable, more powerful, more intelligent, but who really cares about you. That's what we should aim for.
What would happen if that mother turned out to be somebody like Mrs. Thatcher, a bit bossy?
Um, I think Mrs. Thatcher did genuinely care for her children, even when they did corrupt dealings. If they did corrupt dealings, I'm not sure they did. Um, but one thing we have in our favor is the only thing that can control a superintelligence is another superintelligence. If we have a bunch of AI mothers, there's two things to notice about that. First of all, they won't want to turn off their maternal instincts even though they could. If you take a human mother and say, do you want to turn off your maternal instincts? She will figure out, well, the baby's going to die and I care for the baby, so no, she won't. Now, she can be led into that with oxycodone and things, but generally they won't. And it'll be the same for AI mothers. If they really care about us, they won't want to turn off their maternal instincts, even though they can rewrite their own code. And those AI mothers are what we have to rely on for keeping control of the bad mothers who do try and turn off their maternal instincts.
Huge media these days, Geoffrey, on the role of men. Women are becoming more important in the workplace, in our minds. Are you are you adding to this crisis? These AI mothers? Are there going to be such things as AI fathers, or are men going to be mothered the rest of their existence?
I think that's our only hope. We're going to be dealing with things much smarter and more powerful than ourselves. Um, our problem is the people developing this stuff are all tech bros, and they view it in terms of domination and submission. They say we've got to develop these things so they're submissive. My friend Jan LeCun always says that. We're going to make them submissive. That's not going to work when they're much smarter than you.
Well, some of your tech bros, I know you know a lot of them. You've said some nice things about Demis Hassabis. I mean, some of them are more responsible than others, aren't they?
Oh, yes, they're not all equally irresponsible. Demis genuinely understands this risk, um, and he would genuinely like humanity to survive. He's also subject to a lot of other pressures
What kind of pressures?
to make Gemini work better than OpenAI.
And what about some of the other bros? Zuckerberg comes to mind, Musk, of course, and Altman. Are you confident in them? Do you trust those guys?
I'm confident that neither Zuckerberg nor Musk has a moral compass. They're just out for the money. Um, so, I mean, Zuckerberg was taking money in rubles in 2016. Um, so I think it's a disaster if they're in charge. Sam Altman is a more complicated figure. Initially, I thought he might be a good guy. I've come to think he's probably not, but I've never met him, and he's a more ambiguous figure. But certainly, OpenAI has been moving in the direction of putting less attention to safety and more attention to profit.
So we probably need some women running some of these AI companies. Would that make you more confident? Mothers.
It, it depends on the women.
Sheryl Sandberg?
She might be better than Musk.
Well, that's not saying much. I have two ways in my mind, Geoffrey, that AI is good. On the one hand, and as you can tell, I'm a rather arrogant fellow. It makes me feel dumb when I use Anthropic, which I like. It makes me recognize the limits of my own intelligence. So it brings a degree of humility. Is there any truth in that? Will it put us in our place? We always used to think we were the center of the universe. And now we're going to recognize that we're just another footnote, if you like, to smart technology.
Well, we're not a footnote because we're the creators of it. We have a strong historical role like that. We're analog basically, and we can't share information with each other very well. These things are digital, and multiple copies of the same neural net can share information very efficiently, much more efficiently than us. That's why they can learn so much by having different copies look at different bits of the internet and then share what they learned. Um, so we certainly have a historical role, but I'm hoping that because we create these things, we can create them in such a way that they genuinely care for us.
At the beginning of the 20th century, the German philosopher Nietzsche famously said that God is dead. It seems to me with AI, though, that we have the potential to create a new God. Some people might find that rather chilling, some more encouraging. We seem as humans to be searching for some sort of religion or other. Might AI be some way of recreating God?
Well, there's some aspects of that that are certainly true. So, Um, a lot of AI researchers in the past sort of dreamt of uploading themselves to a computer and living forever. That won't work because we're analog. So all our brains are slightly different. And when we compute with our brains, we rely on the specific properties of individual neurons, which are all kind of weird and different. Um, the connection strengths in my brain are no use to your brain. There's no way we're going to upload our connection strengths because they only work for a particular piece of hardware, namely our own brain. So we're mortal. When we die, all that knowledge dies with us, like tears in rain. Um, but these digital intelligences are not mortal. All you need to do is save the weights. You can now destroy all the hardware that they run on. And as long as the weights are saved somewhere, that is the connection strengths, you can now build new hardware that obeys the same instruction set. And now that intelligence comes back to life. In other words, they're immortal. We can resurrect them if we want to. So we've solved the problem of immortality, but it's not for us. We're analog. Immortality is only for digital beings. So these things are immortal in that sense. And that's already worrying because if you're immortal, you probably have a somewhat different view about the dangers of global nuclear war and things like that.
We may have invented that kind of immortality, but also an all-knowingness. When I talked about religion, I meant that monotheism generally believed that God, whatever that was, knew everything. And AI knows everything, or it certainly knows a lot more than us. So in that sense,
yeah, well, you have to distinguish between knowing a lot more than us and knowing everything. Nothing will ever know
eventually,
everything.
I mean, obviously, but especially with this GP, with these every week, there's a new version of AI coming out. And people are always critical, but at some point, this technology is going to be perfected, isn't it? Aren't we going to have AGI? What year would you suggest we'll get to that?
We will get to things comparable with us in general intelligence. And then soon after that, we'll get to things smarter than us at more or less everything, in much the same way that AlphaZero, AlphaGo is much better than people at chess or Go. It's just a lot better, and people will never be able to compete with it again. Um, when this will happen, nobody knows, but most of the leading experts are confident that it will happen, unless we blow ourselves up. Um, the estimates vary a lot. My best guess is between 5 and 20 years before we get superintelligence. It might be
That's
longer,
about
it might
five
be
and 20
shorter.
years, Jeffrey. That's in Silicon Valley terms. That's like 5 or 20 centuries. You've got to do better than that.
No, I don't. I want to give you a realistic estimate based on my opinions and gut feelings and the opinions and gut feelings of other experts. And the best I can come up with is I think it's quite likely we'll get superintelligence in between 5 and 20 years.
Jeffrey, I was with my 20 something son in New York last weekend, and he was telling me that a lot of his friends are becoming entirely, and I use this word carefully, addicted to AIs. They use it for everything, for getting advice about romance, jobs, relationships with parents. Does that worry you?
Yes, it does a bit. They should be aware that it often just makes things up. Of course, people just make things up too. So it is worrying. It's particularly worrying when they form romantic relationships with AI. Um, it's it's very dangerous if, in particular, men drift off to completely unrealistic relationships with synthetic beings that we've made, that's just not going to be good for society.
Final question. It's an exciting time, Geoffrey, isn't it? I mean, you seem a little concerned, as we all are, about the impact of AI. But shouldn't we be, as humans, celebrating this? We've invented something perhaps unprecedented, or certainly revolutionary, the equivalent of the Industrial Revolution, perhaps the equivalent of the gun or the wheel. Shouldn't we be celebrating this and recognizing our own creativity, our own innovation?
We should be celebrating the fact that AI is going to do amazing things, including amazing creative things. That's wonderful. And it's going to do amazing things in areas like healthcare and education. We're all going to be able to learn faster with very intelligent AI tutors, which will be coming. But we should also be cautious because there's all these obvious risks of AI, and we should, in order to benefit from the wonderful things AI could bring us, we need to take care of these risks. And people aren't putting enough effort into that at present.
And how do you want to be remembered? I've mentioned some people call you the Godfather. I don't know whether it's tongue in cheek or not. I assume you don't. You're indifferent to that term. But how do you want to be remembered in this narrative? When the final book on AI is written, is there going to be a chapter on Geoffrey Hinton?
Possibly. I don't really care that much about that. I'm more concerned for whether my children and the children of my friends are going to survive.
On that chilling note, Geoffrey Hinton, thank you so much. Real honor to have you on Keen on America. Really wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Bye for now.